Today in the EU, how a budget bill could end the French left. For the first time in 60 years, France started the year without a budget bill after December's vote triggered the collapse of Prime Minister Barnier's 3-month-old government. But this week, the new Prime Minister, François Bayrou, managed to push through the budget, avoid the new Popular Front's alliance no-confidence vote, and secure his own job in the process. Now, the opposition is pointing fingers at one party in particular, the Socialists, who broke away from the NFP and decided not to rally behind the group's vote. The party divisions within the Left Alliance could mark the end of it and leave France left in limbo. So could the Socialists deal the final blow to the NFP? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. I'm calling up Theo Bourgery-Gonse, our politics reporter based in Paris. Hello, Theo.
Hi, Giada.
So we're almost at the end of what the French Prime Minister Bayrou called a week of truth and responsibility, where France's new government managed to push through their new budget bill.
Nous voici à l'heure de vérité. Nous voici même à la semaine de vérité et de responsabilité. Aucun pays ne peut vivre sans budget.
Tell us what happened.
So on Monday, the budget bill, as well as an equally important social security budget bill, which looks at government's health spending, both of them have been forced through the parliament.
J'ai l'honneur d'engager, en vertu de l'article 49 alinéa 3 de la Constitution, la responsabilité du gouvernement sur le texte de la commission mixte paritaire complété d'amendements techniques et de coordination. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
And today, on Wednesday, there will be the vote of no confidence that is held. And the question remains, though the question is, we have the answer to this question already, almost certainly, over whether the government will survive and can go on, and whether France can actually have a budget for 2025.
And the budget vote result is strictly tied to the socialist position. But before we get to that, why has it been so complicated to pass a budget bill in the first place?
I mean, the budget is one of the most important legislative acts every year that takes place in France and other countries around the world, in fact. And it's often negotiated in the fall of every year for the year after. So in this instance, we would have had negotiations over a 2025 budget bill in the fall of 2024. And we did under Michel Barnier's government, if you remember his short-term tenure as prime minister.
Yeah, I remember we covered it together, actually.
Yeah, and we were both in Paris at the time.
Just got to the Assemblée Nationale. It's packed with journalists discussing whether or not there will be a vote of no confidence. Everybody's on their phones. Everyone seems to be holding their breath.
And in quite a historic turn of events, Michel Barnier was actually booted out as prime minister because there was a majority of votes to vote the government down. And so it left the country without a budget. And this is very much a novel thing in the past 50 or 60 years in France. So the government at the time, as a very last minute move, adopted this copy-paste, if you will, of the 2024 budget onto 2025, but it didn't account for inflation and it didn't account for new spending priorities. So there needed to be a new negotiations and a new bill adopted as quickly as possible. This is what is happening today.
Right. Indeed, the government is undergoing significant stress, yet a new vote of no confidence led by the hard left, La France Insoumise, which is part of the left-leaning coalition, De Nouveau Front Populaire. The Socialists are part of this alliance as well. However, they said they would not vote to take the government down after days of hesitation where we didn't know what would happen. So why is it significant, and how has their strategy changed through time?
Of course. I mean, you've got to go back to a few months ago and to Michel Barnier being toppled. The Socialists had voted against the government and had voted to see the government fall. This time around, over a budget bill which has seen some changes, but the nature of that bill remains the same and looks to cut some 50 billion euros worth of public spending. This time around, the Socialists have changed their approach. And it is significant for many reasons. One is that the Socialists have shown some kind of willingness to work in partnership with the government, mindful as they are that a country without a budget is incredibly risky and might actually hurt their voters. Mm-hmm. But it is also significant because they're breaking ties, as you said, with the other left-leaning factions and really creating some kind of political crisis within the left between the Socialists, which tend to be social democrats, and the rest of the left-leaning factions, the communists, the Greens, and the far left, La France Insoumise, which tend to have a more radical left approach.
However, interestingly enough, the Socialists want to file a new vote of no confidence a little later down the line to condemn the Prime Minister's latest comments where he explained how in France there was a feeling that immigrants were flooding the country. Now, will votes of no confidence ever end in France?
Well, it's a brilliant question, Giada. And to be fair, what we're saying is that, or what this indicates really is that whilst the budget has been passed, or is likely to be passed once the vote actually takes place later today, we're in for a ride and some significant instability in parliament going forward. I mean, this new vote of no confidence that the Socialists have said they would file looks to condemn Bayrou's claims on immigration. He said 10 days ago that there was a feeling of immigrants flooding the country, which is very much the terms of the far right. And the Socialists want to sanction him for that. In reality, if you're looking at the political makeup of the parliament, obviously the government and government forces will vote against that vote of no confidence, and the far right will obviously vote against. So there's absolutely no chance that this new vote of no confidence that will be filed after the budget is fully adopted will ever pass. So it's a political statement with little to no actual impact politically.
And I'm trying to make sense of it, though, because on one hand, the Socialists are distancing themselves from other left-leaning parties, hindering the unity of the left alliance, the NFP. So what's next for them? Is this a conscious strategy, or this could turn out to be a mistake and mark the end of the left coalition?
I mean, it's a very hard question to answer, and I think it's an incredibly hard question that the Socialists have had to face, and they don't know the extent to which this will pan out in their voters' behavior. But essentially, the general belief when you talk to socialist lawmakers is that their electoral base is fed up with not having a budget, and that it's needed to for economic forces across the country to actually be able to do their job. And I think there is a sense of responsibility, and it's a word that the socialists have used many times, that they may not agree with the full content of the budget, but it's better than nothing. And not having a budget would hurt the country so much that they would lose more out of not adopting it than adopting a budget that they don't fully agree with.
And that's what First Secretary of the Socialist Party, Olivier Faure, repeated on Monday, warning of what the risks of not having a budget would mean for the country.
Qui vous a dit que nous validions? Nous avons voté contre ce budget au Sénat.
Who told you that we were vouching for this budget? We've voted against it at the Senate, but we won't censor it because it would do even more harm. What would come next? Having a prime minister further to the right who'd negotiate their own survival with the far right? Or having the president resign, which would mean a new election in 35 days according to our constitution?
So there's this sense of consensus. And you have to bear in mind that the Socialists, unlike other left-wing factions, they have been in power. I mean, they had presidents across the past 30 years. And so they know what it is to make consensus and to make concessions in the context of passing laws. And I think they want to express that and not be positioned as hardcore opposition. So it is a very conscious strategy. But we have to bear in mind that half of their voter base will probably welcome this move. And another half will be worried that the Socialists are moving away from the New Popular Front and might sanction them in the next electoral cycle. So it was a very complex equation for them to handle.
And we've seen in other countries how the fragmentation of the left has ended up pushing voters in the arms of the right. In this specific case, the far-right party, Rassemblement National, voted to take Michel Barnier's government down in December. Now, instead, it's likely that they will support Bayrou's budget. What's happening there?
Yeah, so just for your listeners to be aware, we don't technically and formally know what the far-right's position is with regards to the vote of no confidence later today. They will announce that at 3 p.m. and it's 2:32 now. But what we're understanding is that they will also give the government a pass. So they will not vote the vote of no confidence. Again, their main argument is we've had a censorship vote once in December. The government did fall. It created a political crisis. And whilst there are a genuine opposition to the government, I don't think they want to be seen as an agent of chaos. And voting in an effort to bring the government down could have been seen by their voters as being agents of chaos.
And especially now, it seems that Bayrou is offering an olive branch to the far right. The Prime Minister has been seen borrowing a keyword from far-right narratives, submersion, flooding, to talk about immigrants. Is that how we should interpret it? Is the Prime Minister trying to give the far-right reassurance that he's heard them too? And does that signal a diminishing relevance of the NFP, which once was the coalition that got the most votes at the past elections?
Yeah, I think Bayrou played a very fine, complex and successful game with both the Socialists and the far right. I mean, he's been a centrist for many moons. And it shows in his capacity to build some kind of consensus and give in here and there for oppositions to feel like they've got something to show to their electorate, but also not lose sight of the budgetary crisis that the France is facing. We have 6% of deficit. This budget should bring it down to 5.4, though some say it's an optimistic plan. That's some 50 billion euros worth of saving. So he was very good in managing his own interests alongside those of the oppositions.
And what sort of tools has he been using?
So for the Socialists, it was very much giving them the opportunity to reopen the negotiations over the pensions reform, though in very strict ways. And for the far right, it's using their narrative. Speaking of flooding, which has been so key to the far right political conversation for years. And in that way, I think he's giving a little bit to everyone, and it's worked.
So in terms of next steps, there's still a long way to approve the whole budget, and France's political landscape looks more fragmented than ever.
Yeah, so just to be completely clear, the budget story is not over yet. It will be over next week because there's different chapters to the social security budget that need to be adopted at different times. That means that there will be other 49.3 and there will be other votes of no confidence going forward in the next 10 days. But it's very, 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 very likely that both the Socialists and the far right will adopt exactly the same approach that they did for today. So ultimately, unless there's a major upset, the budget and the social security budget will be adopted. But it's not the end for Bayrou, and the political instability in parliament is still incredibly great. And now that we've moved on from this critical piece of legislation, we can move to more societal issues. You can expect major disagreements over the renegotiation of the pensions reform and where that takes the piece of legislation. And then picture yourself that by October of this year, there will be yet another negotiation for the 2026 budget. And God knows the kind of conversations that we can expect there, the kind of disagreement, and what could happen to the government then.
We'll definitely keep an eye on it and keep reporting on it on the podcast. Thank you, Theo.
Thank you, Giada.
This was Euractiv's podcast, Today in the EU. Sound design by Miriam Sáenz de Tejada, research and production by Charles Cohen. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news and sign up for our newsletters. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your favorite streaming platforms. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a review. It will really help us spread the word about our work. See you tomorrow. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.